Margaret explained a little bit, and like a lot of us, after the March on Washington and after the Capitol was stormed, Margaret was very, very deeply upset and troubled, as was I. And both of us, I think, felt equally horrified that our country has become so divisive, because Margaret and I always have been more centrist and kind of about being in the middle. And I just applaud the fact that Margaret, it's like she told me over the phone, she said, there's a lot of things that need to change, but I'm just trying to change one thing because I want our state to be better. And I agree with her on that. I'm a lifelong Republican. I've always tried to exercise my voting rights in every single election. I was raised to understand that our vote is precious. We live in the best country in the free world, and there are people who give their lives just to have the right to vote. And Margaret and I both have children. Mine are just a little bit older than hers, but I have of late become horrified that my children don't see any point in voting. And my youngest daughter just got married, and her husband, who's one of the brightest people I know, has some really good statistical reasons why he doesn't see any reason to vote in Oklahoma. And I'm so shocked by this that I just think something has to be done. I'm tired of our state being last. We're last on a lot of things. We have the lowest voter turnout in the country. We have the worst poverty in the country, and our school systems are always in probably the bottom 5, if not the bottom 3. And Oklahomans deserve better than that. We live in a great state. I'm so proud to live here, but we've got to change some things.
So one of the secrets is that when you're in Congress, or when you're in the legislature, or when you're mayor, you're running very full speed with things that are coming at you constantly, trying to keep up with it. But when you do something like, when I left Congress, I went into academia, and I started teaching at Harvard, where I taught for 11 years. And then when you're there, so the secret I learned about teachers is that when you're in class, you're on, and when you're prepping for class, you're on, but the rest of the time you have time to think. You have time to really reflect on things. And I began to realize that there were so many ways in which what the people I knew, the Oklahomans I knew, what they were like, the good people, thoughtful, sane, responsible, caring people, and then so many others I had come to know across the country, were not reflected in our government institutions. They were not reflected in Congress. The people in Congress were either far more left or far more right than the people I knew, and much less willing to address problems together across the aisle. And so I started thinking about it. I was giving a speech to a large group. It was, this room this side just full, and somebody in the back, when I got through, said, which I had never thought of, said, "Oh, you're a systems engineer." Well, I didn't even know what a systems engineer was. But I came to realize, David, that when something is really wrong, you've either hired the wrong people, and I don't believe that because I know many people who are good people, thoughtful people, or you have the wrong system. And as I looked at it, more and more it became obvious that the people who were making the laws, who had been selected by, quote, the people, weren't reflective of that people. And I began to understand why. I started looking, and I saw the primaries and the closed primaries, where instead of the American people getting to choose from all of their neighbors, those people that they wanted representing them, that when you went to the polls, you had what was left after the partisans got through winnowing the field and telling you who you must choose between. And so I became more and more convinced, David, that in order to make our system work, make the country work again, you had to get past that, where the party leadership was choking off the ability of the American people to have their views accurately represented. So that's what happened. Just I woke up, and it is the system, and nothing is going to change. And some people don't want to hear it. Nothing is going to change unless we change the system.
Well said.
This is my first time in Oklahoma since I was 2 months old, and my parents were at Altus Air Force Base. So I'm back. Yeah, I started Open Primaries back in 2009. I was living in New York City, which is a closed state and a closed city run by the Democratic Party. I think we have lower voter turnout than Oklahoma. It's an abysmal political culture where if you're not part of the Democratic club, you really have no voice. And we tried to bust that up. We formed a coalition with Mike Bloomberg, who was the first independent mayor, and we got that on the ballot, and we got absolutely crushed. And it was a real wake-up call for me. It was seeing that this issue of leveling the playing field, allowing there to be full participation, regardless of whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, was something that was going to become more and more important as partisanship became more and more entrenched and voter turnout went down. So I started the organization back in 2009. I've said this on podcasts before and radio shows. The experience was forming a UFO research organization back in 2009. People looked at me like I was a little bit crazy for caring about primaries. Now, fast forward 15 years, and it's on the front pages of newspapers. What attracted me to Oklahoma was you. I reached out to you in 2014 after you introduced those bills when you were in the state Senate, and as trial balloons, and we saw how tough this was going to be. And then the Oklahoma Academy put out their great report back in 2017 after doing a statewide tour talking about the need for open primaries. And then Margaret picked up the banner, and Mickey has been talking about this for more than a decade. And there is just a consistent drumbeat of different voices from different places on the political spectrum that are pointing out that independent voters are the fastest growing segment of the electorate, that even though it's a Republican-dominated state, that 50% of voters are not Republicans, and they have almost no voice in the state. And you've got this counter. It's so different how Tulsa and Oklahoma City are run and governed, and the democracy that's like built into the culture, and how state government functions. And I think I've been inspired by the level of enthusiasm and interest in tackling this.
When I worked in the Senate, I saw a trend, which is that about 85% of legislation that gets introduced is political garbage. It is stuff that gets brought up so that a senator or a representative can go back and tell their base, I've introduced a bill to do X, Y, and Z, throwing the red meat out, knowing it will never be heard in committee, let alone voted on the floor. But then there's stuff that does need to get done. And for that stuff, there are legislators who are just dramatically more effective at getting things passed. And what I saw in those that were effective was that they would identify an issue and then they go find somebody as far out on the other side of the ideological spectrum from them as they could find, but find that 70% common ground that you're talking about, Mayor Holt, and bring that forward, and it would get passed. Ted Kennedy was the master of this when I was there. Mitch McConnell was also very effective at this when I was there. Probably the bill that I worked on that I'm most proud of was a piece of legislation dealing with the Hurricane Katrina aftermath. Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. The federal government didn't do anything basically for a week, and then just started throwing tens of billions of dollars at the response. And Dr. Coburn realized this is just setting us up for massive abuse. We've got to have an oversight function put in place. We need something passed quickly, get it done. And we ended up working on that bill with his fellow freshman senator, Barack Obama. Tom Coburn and Barack Obama, about as far apart on the political spectrum as you could find, two senators at that time, co-sponsored that bill. They got Harry Reid, the Democrat leader, and Bill Frist, the Republican leader, to co-sponsor it. And President Bush saw the writing on the wall and just went ahead and did it by executive order. We didn't even have to pass anything. So that was my experience with getting things done. Well, then I got elected to the city council in Tulsa, and we had a majority Republican council. We had a Democrat mayor at the time, Kathy Taylor. And there was a sense amongst my colleagues on the council that regardless of what Kathy says, we're the opposition. That's our job here. Like, we've got to find things wrong with it. I did not subscribe to that. Even though she had run against and defeated my cousin just like a year and a half before, we worked together very well. But I tell you that story because the contrast, and by the way, I'm a convert on this. When a group brought forward nonpartisan elections in Tulsa, I opposed it. And I opposed it because my thought at the time was the purpose of political parties is to turn out voters. At the end of the day, that's their main function historically. And so if we have nonpartisan elections, then the parties aren't incentivized to be involved and voter turnout will go down. Well, I'm here to tell you today and own up to it, I was totally wrong. We have seen no decline in voter turnout in elections in Tulsa. The big change that we have seen is that the debates on the city council and at City Hall are not partisan anymore. They have shifted to issues. You still have disagreements about policy and what ought to be done and what the right thing to do for a city is. And you still have personality differences and people who just don't get along. But it's not tied up in this partisan superstructure based on federal issues, at best, that have no relevance to whether or not you're fixing a street or hiring more police officers or making sure that firefighters have trucks that work. And so that's been the big change that I have seen, and why I ran, when I did run for mayor, as a committed nonpartisan with Republicans, Democrats, and independents, both on our campaign team, but then after I was elected, in my office. I may have more Democrats on my staff than any elected official in Oklahoma, at least at the statewide or city level. And it's not on purpose. I don't check anybody's partisan identification because I don't think one party has the market cornered on smart people who love Tulsa and are going to work hard. And we've had great success. The last thing I'll say, and I'll say this to tee it back up to you, is at the most fundamental level, if you want to see the benefits of how this works, if you think things in Tulsa are going well or things in Oklahoma City are going well, it's because you have mayors in both of those cities who have taken this approach of moving beyond partisanship and focusing on the issues that really impact people and how you can bring people together around those and find common ground. And that's the end result that I think you get when you open up more competition. Sorry, like the old preacher here. One more last thing. A lot of people ask me, well, in Oklahoma, do you think this has any chance of passing? I do, and here's why. Oklahomans like competition. That's what this is about. If you're a capitalist, you believe that more competition yields better products and better results. That's what this is about. It's about giving Oklahoma voters more options and creating a greater competition of ideas for those who are seeking to serve them, rather than having them protected by partisan monopolies within which they have to operate. Thank you.
My experience was I did, serve in an office as a state senator for 2 terms that was operated under a closed partisan primary process, and now I serve as mayor in a system where every candidate has to face all the voters and all the voters get to see all the candidates. And it's nonpartisan, but I don't think that's the most vital aspect of it. I think the most vital aspect of it is that everybody votes, and so you're incentivized, whether you had an R or a D after your name or nothing after your name, you're incentivized to build a coalition of people across party lines. And as GT said, it also helps if the candidates embrace that, and we have. But you're incentivized to. You're not incentivized to do that in a closed partisan primary system. When I ran for the state Senate, I ran in Northwest Oklahoma City and the seat to that point had been very Republican. Now my successor is a Democrat, and she's here tonight, Julia Kurt. But at that time, there had not even been a general election held in that seat for like 20 years. And I never faced a general election. It was always viewed that the Republican primary was the entire election. But, you know, I mean, the registered Republicans were probably barely half of the residents, you know, because, I mean, there was independents and there were Democrats. But you were only incentivized to act in a way that pleased this, you know, plurality of your district. But you're supposed to represent everybody, right? So, I mean, how do you imagine it changes the way that you serve and the way that you campaign if you're only facing, for all functional purposes, you know, this subset of the electorate? You know, American democratic experiment assumes inherently that the wisdom of the crowd is the best possible outcome, and we are not relying upon the wisdom of the entire crowd. We are relying upon the wisdom of a subset. Then sometimes, you know, like in our system where you have a runoff, it's like a subset of a subset. You know, I mean, if you actually go through Oklahoma political history for the last 25 years, like all the most important decisions have been made in the Republican runoff, which is also the least participated in chapter of the election process. So like the smallest number of people are making the most important decisions. Whereas in Oklahoma City and now Tulsa, you know, everybody's invited to make the decision. And it just changes the incentive structure, and it changes the way that you serve and the way that you govern. And as GT said, and I'll echo, it's like people in Oklahoma City and Tulsa are used to this like statesmanlike, unifying, you know, pragmatic way of service, especially at the mayoral level. And it yields, I would argue, yielding pretty good results. And, you know, and people, especially in Oklahoma City, you know, look at like this, they often talk about, oh, we've had this great string of mayors as if like it was luck or something. You know, it was the process. The process created people who brought people together. And you know, Joshua Harris-Till is here, right? Yeah, like on my election night watch party in 2022, Joshua was a major leader in Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020. He was at my party. So was the president of the FOP. Do you think there's like a lot of politicians in America who could thread that needle? But, you know, both of those groups saw me as somebody who was like trying to find common purpose and understood like we kind of have to if we're ever going to move forward as a community. And again, like I was incentivized to do that. I think there's other people in elected office at other levels who are like capable of doing that, but they're not going to because they're scared to death of their own shadow. You know, they're scared of getting beat in their primary, whether it's left or right. You know, we in Oklahoma are more used to the problems on the far right because that's like the dominant party here. But we could be having this exact same conversation in New York or California and be very frustrated at what's going on the extreme left. You know, it's the same problems, just a different flavor. So. I became, as John said, sort of I'd started in the mayor's office as a staffer, went to the Senate as a senator, and, you know, started to see over time, much like Mickey, you finally start to kind of analyze how we got here and started to see that the process was the thing. And we have this like amazing case study in Oklahoma City and now in Tulsa of showing what good governance can look like. And it's not perfect. It's still a democratic process and it still relies upon human beings. But things are going so much better in Oklahoma City and Tulsa than they are on a state level. And I think you find that that's going to be the case in a lot of different states where they have this same dichotomy.
So every one of you, whether you're in business or you're in a university or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, are motivated in your decision making by the incentive system. It's what is going to get you the result you want, what is going to help you achieve your business goal or your academic advancement or whatever it is. And the problem we have here is that the incentive system with a closed primary, it's not that Oklahomans are far right or far left, but the incentive system says that if you want to keep your job, if you want to remain in the legislature, if you want to remain in whatever office you hold, you must pay attention only to the people who vote in a partisan primary. Because if you don't make it through that primary, you're through. You're done. And so it works both ways. You are forcing, when the system we have without this, is you force people who would not ordinarily be on the extremes. And you see this in Congress. People who would not ordinarily be on the extremes are voting in ways that make you roll your eyes. She did what? He did what? Well, it's because their ability to remain in that office and do what good they think they can do depends on making that small subgroup of the electorate happy. Otherwise, you're done. I remember thinking, I would say that when I ran for office, I could say, so you know me, I'm your neighbor, you've listened to me, you've decided whether you think I know anything, you've decided whether my views are similar to your views, whether or not I'm articulate enough to help advance your views. Vote for me, and I will do whatever my party leader tells me to do. And I cannot imagine that everybody would, but that's what is really happening, except they don't have that conversation. Right. So I watch now, I know more about Congress than I do about the legislature here, but so in Congress, if you've noticed, you just follow the news. There's a female United States senator who happens to be part of the same fellowship as David and GT, who announced that she was going to be an independent, and she was going to make decisions based on what she thought was the right thing to do. She was attacked mercilessly by the press and everybody else. No, you're not being loyal to your team. In the events that we just had, and I don't care whether you thought Kevin McCarthy was a horror or wonderful, whatever he thought, the media and reporters and politicians were all saying, the ones we're going to cheer for are the ones who stood together and marched in lockstep, because that's where the reward system is. So if you want to create a system that changes how people behave once they're in office, not just about getting elected, how people behave when they are in office, you've got to change the system so they have to listen to all of the voters. They have to respond to all of the voters. And if you do that, you're going to get, not only in mayor's offices, but you're going to get in the state legislature. You're going to get in Congress people like GT and David, instead of what we see now, where people say, how much harm can I do to the other side? Because all that matters is that we win the next election. And I said this, and we had a talk earlier at your law school, my law school too, and talked about somebody who said, a former member of Congress talking about the battle over the speakership, who said that what they did in removing McCarthy, and again I said I don't care how you feel about that it wasn't good for the country, but it was good. Well, if it ain't good for the country, it ain't good. And so what you need to do is to change that system where people respond to their leadership and in their party, and that's all that matters. So what do we need to do? That I am here because, like John Updike, I'm here because we need to change here and in other places the system where party primaries determine who you have, who you can vote for, who's on the ballot for you, and so it works for the candidates and it works for the voters. You deserve, every one of you deserve, when you go to the polls, to have a full range of options to decide who you want making the laws for you. And I don't know any other way to get there except by changing the system and getting rid of partisan primaries.
I completely agree with. I'm just sitting here nodding and mm-hmming at everything Mickey says, and I think it bears importance to this conversation because David and I are both products of the fellowship that Mickey ran at the Aspen Institute. The idea behind the Rodell Fellowship is that they would pick, 12 Republicans and 12, at least in my class, 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats, and then you convene a couple times a year for a couple years, and you debate case studies and philosophical readings. And the purpose of it is to teach you basically how to respectfully disagree and engage with people in the other party. And like in my class, it was fascinating. I mean, we had Gavin Newsom, who's now the governor of California, and Pam Bondi, who went on to be the Attorney General of Florida and was one of Donald Trump's attorneys. And many of us who are in between those two on the political spectrum. But the value of it, I think, and I don't think it's an accident that David and I both went through the program, is that you do have a network. And David's exactly right. There are elected officials all over America who Mickey is a great mentor to, who have a very similar philosophy that we do, that you get better ideas and better results when you have a diversity of viewpoints around a table trying to identify that common ground. For us in Oklahoma, I would just reiterate, we have seen, especially in Tulsa, which is more recent, we've seen what it looks like and what it can look like if you're on a partisan basis and you have people who are fixated on that partisan division and on making sure that the party apparatchiks don't get mad at them on any particular issue. And the switch, and again, this didn't change in Tulsa a long time ago. It changed, I think, maybe at the most 10 years ago. So it's a recent change. But the debates that you see on our council today have no partisan content. They still have debates, but it is about the policy and what's best for our community. And I think if we can switch to that here in Oklahoma, it would be very powerful. I think there are a ton of people who don't ever get a chance to select who's going to run our state because of the party that they're in. And the incentive structure is not there to reward people who try to find common ground with people in the other political party. I've had plenty of people, as David mentioned, I got 12 months and 30 days left as mayor of Tulsa. And I've had lots of people tell me, well, thank you very much for your service. I mean, we all know this is the end of the road for you because you can never win a Republican primary in Oklahoma because you've worked with Democrats too much. That should not be, and for me, I'm going to do that anyway because it's what's best for Tulsa. But that should not be what the expected outcome is for people. It should be trying to identify that common ground first as Oklahomans, and then being rewarded for the people who are more effective at getting things done or not. But only having it based on who's more loyal and more in lockstep with party leadership is what leads to mediocrity in the end result, I think. And again, I will come back to this again and again. You get better outcomes when you have more competition. And if you have protected structures that protect weak leadership and people who don't want to work to find common ground and are more interested in politics than public service, you're going to get the results that we often see.
I think the campaigns that we've seen be most successful, California, Florida, St. Louis, are the campaigns that spend the time to bring together a diverse group of stakeholders from the left, from the right, from the center, Democrat, Republican, Independent. Take the time to say, hey, we've got this system that works at the municipal level, the top two system. Is that what we want to do at the state level? Should we look at some other options? Should we, see what's going to work best here? I'm a big believer that the most powerful reform campaigns are not cookie cutter. They're not, hey, some national group came in and told us what to do and we're just following their orders. Those campaigns, they tend to fail, and even if they win, they tend to get overturned. There's got to be strong local buy-in. So I think that rooms like this are absolutely crucial, and we should be doing this over many, many months, raising money, building the committees, and so forth. And then once a decision's been made about the policy, I think put it on the ballot. I think go directly to the ballot, get the signatures, put it on the ballot, do the grassroots work, run the great commercials, and remind people that this, see, the thing that I find so both exciting and challenging is that the system that you're talking about, Mayor Bynum and Mayor Holt, this is in place in 85% of the cities in this country. This is not some novel new experiment. This is how we elect mayors. We do it in a nonpartisan way. It's why local government has 80% approval and Congress has 12% approval. Okay, it's not a big mystery. So, but the challenge is to build the kind of coalition that is as inclusive and diverse as the state itself, and then put it on the ballot and go to the voters and appeal to them on the basic values that you all have all been articulating. This is about fairness. This is about inclusion. It's about every vote matters. Every politician should have to face every voter in every election. Those are core values that people, my experience, people in Oklahoma have a deep, deep affection for. So I think if we can get it on the ballot, we've got a very good chance of winning. And just so you all know, rooms like this are happening all over the country. People are outraged at the kind of dysfunction and failure that has become the norm in our national government play. So you're not alone.